And so the Hanukkah Menorah, however, has made a comeback. Why? As we had said earlier on at the beginning, Hanukkah, along with Passover, these two holidays have become the most celebrated holidays in the current Jewish world that are not Orthodox, okay? We're talking about the 85% of the Jewish world which is not Orthodox. You can go to many places in the US and you'll find no Orthodox people. The two most popular holidays are Passover in the spring, Hanukkah in the winter, because, as we said, these are home-celebrated holidays. You don't need to go into a synagogue to celebrate them, whereas for the previous King of the Hill, the two biggest ones in my early youth were Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Both have to be celebrated in the synagogue. Both require some sort of synagogue membership. But as people became more independent, as synagogue membership plummeted in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the holidays of Passover, you get yourself a Haggadah, and you just have enough Haggadahs for the family, and you can have your own Passover Seder. You can roll your own. You can customize your Passover Seder. You can add elements of your politics, and oftentimes people did. The same thing with Hanukkah. You can download Hanukkah instructions, and it's a very family sort of holiday. So what we're going to do, hopefully without burning the place down, is to light the menorah. I've been assured by the management that we are safe in doing this, and so if there's a problem, I didn't say that, okay? And so the next slide, which I need to control, has the blessings. Hanukkah candles come in all kinds of sizes. They come very expensive, or they come for $1.99, like these, okay? So these are amongst the least attractive, but what is the significance of the arrangement of the colors? Anyone? Nothing. It's a trick question. Absolutely nothing. Don't let me lead you down the garden path on that one. Absolutely nothing. So, the candles are lit. This whole thing here is a little too clean. It's a little too new. So maybe we can get some I have not used to doing this. Any firebugs out there? The other side. Oh, okay. So we're going to light the first one, and then, okay, I will invite you to, she's running to get the fire extinguisher. You know the tune? Baruch, Baruch. Okay, so here's the words to the prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavoteinu bayamim hahem Bahazman hazeh. And then on the first night of Passover, first night of Hanukkah, see, Passover and Hanukkah always go together. This is the prayer we add on the first night. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechecheyanu v'ki'imanu v'higianu lahazman hazeh. You did very well. Thank you. Okay. Thank you to our pianist. And a question.
Yeah, you lit all of them.
Right.
Are you going to explain that you don't do that?
We don't do that normally. On the first, so here's the pop quiz that you were fearing. On the first night of Hanukkah, how many total candles are lit? The lady from New York City. Two. Deborah Kramer is absolutely right. She's a Hebrew teacher. She should know. Each night, the first thing you do is you light the center candle. And then, and this depending on various traditions, how do you light it from this side first or this side first? The general preference is you want this to be a testimony to those outside your home. Theoretically, this should be on the windowsill so that people can see the miracle. In Israel, Google images of Hanukkah being celebrated in Israel, particularly of Hanukkah Menorahs in Israel. Believe it or not, there are small glass boxes in metal frames that people will often place outside their home to increase the mitzvah of showing the miracle in a public way. So they'll take a small compact menorah, place it in kind of like a 10-gallon fish bowl, fish tank size item. So imagine like a 10-gallon fish tank. They'll place the menorah inside it, and you have several families in a typical building will have this side by side, each family giving attestation to the fact that God performed a miracle. Instead of the oil lasting just one night, the oil lasted 8 nights. For the Maccabees, the fact that the oil lasted 8 nights was a sign to them that God had accepted their rededication of the temple. So the idea was that they were offering up to God this rededication. God, please accept our dedication of the temple. And so it was a sign that God had accepted it. So I want you to know what you just sang. I don't want you to think you sang anything off. Here's the translation of what we just sang with the brachot, with the blessings. So blessed be thou, you can recite it with me, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with thy commandments. And by the way, this first phrase is why we change in our Shabbat service, why we change this in the traditional Shabbat blessings. He's not sanctified us with like his commandments. We can't keep his commandments, okay? He sanctified us b'chazdo. We have a young lady here by the name of Chesed. It's God's unmerited loving kindness. And when we say he has sanctified us with chasdo, it's his chesed, third person, masculine singular. He has sanctified us with his grace. It's another word for grace. We are recipients, gratefully, of his grace. So that's why we do change the Shabbat blessing. And then it says, and commanded us to kindle the Hanukkah lights. Does it say that? No. Nowhere in the Bible, actually nowhere even in rabbinical literature, is there a command. There are recitations of people doing it. There are rules and regulations for how you're supposed to do it, but never is there a claim that God commanded us to light the Hanukkah Menorah. So this sort of thing that we just did as believers falls under that Romans 14 category of having freedom in non-essentials. The whole principle of Romans 14 is that we need to have unity and we need to be in agreement on essential areas of doctrine. The deity of Messiah Jesus, the inspiration of the Scripture, that salvation comes by faith alone. These are core doctrines that we hold in common with believers in Jesus the Messiah around the world. But there are a whole host of other secondary doctrines which it's understandable believers may come to different positions on. The timing of the rapture, this thing, that thing, a whole host of things. Foot washing, the list is almost endless. We allow the same sort of slack to other believers that we want God to give us. The same sort of wiggle room that we ask of God, we want to allow other believers. And so we do this not out of necessity. We don't light Hanukkah candles because we must. There are many Jewish believers who might never light Hanukkah candles. It's not a test of spirituality at all, but rather in the spirit of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20, where Paul, the great non-legalist, the great apostle of liberty, where Paul, the person who taught that we're not under Mosaic law, said in that verse, to the Jews I became as a Jew, literally to the Judeans. He was a Jew, but he wasn't a Judean. To the Judeans I became as a Judean. In other words, he was a Jew from the diaspora. He didn't look all that religious. He voluntarily took on additional Jewish culture, additional Jewish layers, additional Jewish garb, so that he could go to the Judeans and share that Messiah had come. His pattern in the book of Acts is unmistakable. Every new town that he went to, the first place that he sought out was, and it's typically described in the book of Acts this way, there was a place of prayer of the Jews. Paul went there and proclaimed that the Messiah had come. And so Paul voluntarily took on all of these additional strictures. This is why when Ariel Ministries was founded, there was no rules and regulations that you've got to do this or you don't have to do this, or you must do this or you should never do the other thing. There is freedom in all these areas. And we allow each other a little bit of wiggle room. We allow each other's culture. We have a beautiful couple from Liberia who is on one of the Ariel representatives. And when they are here, Shirley, our good friend from Liberia, she does African song in our services. And she lifts her voice in praise to God. It is wonderful and it's catchy. We find ourselves singing it days later. Because God uses God is not culture bound. He is not subject to, he's not captive to any human culture, including American Jewish culture. Long before there was an American Jewish culture, there was more authentic Jewish culture. The culture of my wife, she tells me, because she's Sephardic. And they have an older culture than ours. But even for her culture, there was Mizrahi Jewish culture, the culture of the Jews who never left the land of Israel. And so God is not bound by human culture. The truths of the gospel are true in whatever culture they find themselves in. We find Jesus going to Jerusalem in John chapter 10, verse 22, specifically to participate in the festivities around the feast of Chanukah. He used the feast at the same time to illustrate the principles of the fact that he is the Messiah. He didn't miss an opportunity to make that point that indeed he was the Savior, he was the Messiah. And so feel free to do these things, but don't feel bound by any of them. A couple of auxiliary things about Chanukah. I have here dreidel, okay, 2 dreidels, a big one and a small one. One of the main goals of celebrating Jewish holidays is to pass the story on to our children. That's why we have a Passover Haggadah. The entire reason for a Passover Haggadah existing is to tell the story of Passover to little Jacob and Sarah, make sure that they understand. Is that biblical? Read your Bible. It says, and you shall tell your children in that day. It says, Bayom Hahu, in that day, your son will ask you, why are you doing these things? And you shall then say, and this is what the text says in Exodus chapter 12. Your son is going to ask you when you celebrate the Passover, why are you doing this? And you shall reply to him, this is what the Lord did for me when he brought me out of Egypt. It's talking about a day far in the future. But the idea is that families in the future, hundreds of years later, will say, we're doing this because this is what God did for me when he brought me out of Egypt. You see, the idea is that every Jewish family is needing to see itself as having been in slavery in Egypt and thus experience the joy of being released from that bondage. And so it's kind of poetic, it's a little sappy, understood, but it is really how we should understand these things, that God redeemed us. When God saved the Jewish people at Hanukkah time, he saved the families who would eventually give birth to Jesus the Messiah. We're happy for the birth of Jesus the Messiah. In him we have life. So you had a stake in all of this Jewish history. It may not be your history in a strict sense, but you have joined Romans 11, and we don't want to take this past where the text does. There's this idea of the commonwealth of Israel. It doesn't make a person Jewish, but it brings you into that protective orbit. You're in the orbit because you have partaken of Messiah. And so that's what Romans 11 is essentially teaching. Romans 11 actually addresses Gentile believers as Gentiles. But at the same time it addresses them as Gentiles, says that you're part of the commonwealth of Israel. So you're not literally Jewish, but you have been brought close because he's brought both groups under one tent. And so we are together in this building. We're male and female. God doesn't erase. The verse that says there is neither Jew nor Gentile, there is neither male nor female, there is neither bond nor free, is thrown in my face saying, what are you doing? Why is this so important to you? Haven't you read the verse? There is neither male nor female, there is neither Jew nor Gentile. So why are you saying you're Jewish? It says there is neither Jew or Gentile. Sir, did you marry a female? Because it says there's neither male nor female. So, are you confused? Who's confused here? No. What the verse is talking about is the methodology of salvation. We all come to the foot of Jesus in the same way. We all are beggars in need of life. So we've all come to the same salvation. We've all come to be sons and daughters of the living God in the same way by faith. I'm not at the front of the line. No one's at the front of the line. Everyone needs to respond by faith. So, back to our dreidels. I get passionate, so I kind of go off on a couple of excursions here. We were talking about the fact that you need to pass this story on to your children. That's what got us off on that. So you need to pass the story on to your children. Children learn best when they can see object lessons. If they only hear the story, in 20 minutes they're going to be in snooze land, okay? It's a good way to put them to sleep. I once had a woman hand me her toddler and say, she wants to hear you explain how Shavuot has to do with the birth of the church. True story. Cute little black baby. She said she wants to hear that story again. I started to tell the story. 5 minutes later, the baby is asleep. And that was the goal, okay? So I have a picture. I put a picture on my Facebook years ago. I was at a true story at a retreat. And so we know that children learn best if they also are able to see an object. With Passover, you see the story. Each of the food items tells the story of Passover, the charoset, the maror, all the bitter herb. He made our lives very bitter. So the kids are eating, they're tasting the story, they're smelling the story, they're throwing the story at each other, all the siblings. They're using all of their senses to take in the story. These are simply spinning tops of one sort or another. If I spin this, it's going to probably go off the... You can do a much better job than I did. This one is very difficult. It takes a very skilled hand to get this one. But however, what's important about these is they help to tell the story. There are 4 Hebrew letters on there. The Hebrew letter Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin. They stand for the acrostic. Where's the Nun? Nun means, here's the acrostic. Nes, Gadol, Haya, Sham. 4 Hebrew letters. Nes, Nun, Gadol is Gimel, Haya is the Hey, Sham is the Shin. Nes Gadol Hayasham means a great miracle happened there. The great miracle is the oil lasting for 8 days. So kids will spin the top, and they can tell the story of Hanukkah. And another version of this, why there are these 4 letters, is because while teaching Jewish stories were forbidden in some of the lands where Jewish people lived, kids were allowed to gamble. And so you can actually use these as gambling toys. Not that I ever did that, but what I've heard from hearsay is that if you use like a whole pile of pretzel sticks, okay, so if you were a kid growing up in Brooklyn in the 60s, if there is such a person, they had a pile of pretzel sticks, and they wanted to gamble using the pretzel sticks. If you spin this and it lands on Nun, nothing happens. If it lands on the Gimel, then you get the whole pile. If it lands on the Sheen, you have to give up your whole pile. If it lands on the hay for half, you get half. And so a few rounds of this, you're either like bloated with pretzels or the other kid is. And so we would use these in Brooklyn back in the day. I'll leave these back here. They come in all sizes. They're plastic, they're wood. This one is actually wood. Some are very decorative. Sometimes the large ones, that when I taught this to the kids this morning, the first thing they said is, "Where's the gelt? Where's the chocolate gelt?" We have a number of kids who go to Messianic congregations in the teen class. There are small gold coins that are wrapped with gold, but inside is milk chocolate. And they're called Hanukkah gelt. Back in the day, centuries ago, the Hanukkah gelt were actual gold coins. But today they have these little coins made out of chocolate but wrapped in gold foil, and they're very popular at Hanukkah time. And a popular gift is to have a large plastic dreidel that's hollow, and you fill it with Hanukkah gelt, with the coins. So in the Messianic Fellowship that Howard and Laurie and myself used to go to for years, you saw an illustration back here. We had loads of kids who would, that's tomorrow. We had loads of kids. Most of these are the children on the left of Jewish believers. We would light the Hanukkah candles. We'd have a teenage girl who actually came up in the program, would lead the whole thing, and the children would families would bring in their own family menorahs and light them. And so it was a very big family atmosphere. It's a very warm memory for the kids. To this day, my son says, well, there are 8 days of Hanukkah. That means 8 presents, right? Our son is an only child. He got 8 presents, one for each night of Hanukkah, and he also informed us that the value of the presents needs to double. It needs to double every day. That was wishful thinking, but he ended up with an Xbox at one of the years. So some biblical, some extra biblical, but this has become one of the 2 most popular holidays in the Jewish calendar. So happy Hanukkah, and not to mix our holidays, but be sure to take a Passover, a Haggadah, as you're on your way out. Take a break.